Hey guys, tonight we're slipping past the heavy wooden doors of a candlelit medieval bedchamber. The air is thick with perfume and dread. You're standing on cold stone floors, barefoot, cloaked in linen so stiff it scratches your skin. Down the corridor, the bells are still ringing from the wedding feast. Everyone's drunk on ale meat grease and expectations. But you're not thinking about the roast boar or the lute music. You're thinking about what comes next, because tonight isn't about romance. It's about ritual power and submission. And you newlywed probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love hearing from every corner of the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1274. You're a young woman, 13, maybe 14, depending on how your father counted the harvests. Today was your wedding day. You didn't choose the man. You barely spoke to him. He's nearly twice your age and owns 4 villages, a forest, and the rights to a small stream where his serfs catch trout. You've been trained for this since you were old enough to sit through your mother's silent grooming rituals, lacing, scolding, praying, brushing, kneeling. This morning nuns helped you bathe. You were told to be clean, pure, God-fearing. They scrubbed you with vinegar and lavender, plaited your hair into something they called modest, and wrapped you in layer upon layer of cloth. You looked like a doll at the altar, ornamental and wide-eyed. You didn't cry, though you wanted to. By nightfall, the veil is lifted, but the theater continues. There is no privacy here, no moment of whispered affection. You're being watched. Maybe not in the room itself, though in some households. Yes, even that. But the servants know. The chambermaid who brought up the wine, she knows. The steward who laid the rushes knows. The priest who blessed your bed knows. Your virginity is not a personal matter, it's a political contract. And tonight is the signature. You sit on the bed legs together, hands folded like you were taught. The linens are white, always white. A clean sheet specially prepared. Tomorrow the women of the household will inspect it. They'll look for blood. They'll hold it up like holy relics. If there's nothing, you could be accused of deceit, maybe even witchcraft. Some girls have been sent back in disgrace, others beaten or worse. You hear footsteps. Your husband enters. You don't know what to expect because no one explained the details, only that you were to be obedient. He smells of wine and horse sweat. His chainmail is off, but he's still wearing his sword belt. He looks at you like a farmer inspects a field he's just acquired. He doesn't ask if you're afraid. He doesn't ask anything at all. What follows isn't gentle. It isn't tender. It's procedural. You close your eyes, say your prayers, try not to cry out. You remember what the midwife whispered, bite your lip, don't fight him, it'll be over soon. And when it is, he rolls over, asleep in seconds. You lie awake, the ache between your legs, blooming slowly. You stare up at the canopy, tracing patterns in the faded embroidery. Saints and vines stitched by women who probably felt the same sting on their own first nights. You listen to the sounds of the castle, the wind against the shutters, the distant howl of a dog, the muffled laughter from the kitchens. But it's the silence inside you that frightens you most. The next morning, the door creaks open. The chambermaid enters with a basin. She doesn't speak. She lifts the linen and folds it back carefully, looking for the stain. You feel your face flush. She doesn't meet your eye. She takes the sheet, places it in a basket, and leaves. You've passed the test. Breakfast is served downstairs. You're expected to attend, though you feel hollow. The noblewomen smile at you like you've joined some secret, miserable club. They all have stories, you can see it in the tightness around their eyes. One leans close and murmurs, "The second night is worse." He'll expect you to enjoy it. You try to smile. You don't manage. They teach you how to keep your face blank, how to sip broth and nod, how to carry your bruises beneath lace and velvet. You learn to ask for herbs, fever, few lavender crushed poppy seed. Not for pleasure, of course, just to sleep. In a week they'll start asking when you'll be with child. That phrase, so gentle, so pretty, is a demand. Your body is a vessel. That's how they speak of it. You're to give heirs, boys preferably, strong ones. Girls are a disappointment, like rain on a feast day. You begin to count the days differently. Not by sun or moon, but by blood and the absence of it. You listen to your body like a clock ticking. Every month without sign is a quiet panic. Every cramp is a whisper of failure. There are prayers for fertility. You light candles. You drink special brews. You visit relics of saintly mothers, bones and rings and scraps of cloth believed to carry miracles. Sometimes the pressure grows too much. A lady once threw herself down a staircase rather than endure another scolding from her husband's mother. She survived but lost the child she hadn't yet confirmed. No one spoke of it again. You wonder if the saints ever bled like this. If they too laid on marriage beds and felt themselves splinter. There are days when your husband is away hunting, fighting, drinking. Those are the good days, the quiet ones. You can walk the gardens, visit the chapel, pretend you're something other than a wife. But even then, the memory of the first night clings to you, like damp wool, like a bruise you can't see but always feel. And you realize this isn't just your story. It's the story of almost every woman in your world. The noble women, the peasant girls, the daughters sold off for land or favor. Their wedding nights were not beginnings. They were trials, initiations, wounds dressed up in flowers and veils. And nobody warned you because everyone already knew. The days blend one into another until you stop marking time by sunlight or bells. Now you measure by silences how long he stays quiet after supper, how long you can delay going up to the bedchamber without being summoned. On better nights, he falls asleep before you undress. On worse ones, you lie still beneath him, staring past the cobwebbed beams, hoping your mind can detach from your body just long enough to float above it all. He isn't cruel, not in the way the stories warn. But that hardly matters. You aren't here to be loved. You're here to bear sons, preserve alliances, and stay agreeable. There's a quiet violence in that, even if it never leaves a bruise. One morning you wake to the sound of chanting outside. A wedding. Another girl's turn. The bells ring bright and triumphant, but your stomach knots. You watch from the window as the procession crosses the courtyard. She's tiny, barely up to the elbow of the man beside her. Her gown swallows her. Her veil trembles. You know exactly how she feels. At dinner, the talk is of dowries and hymens of cloistered daughters finally doing their duty. The older women nod with satisfaction. They sip spiced wine, chew on soft bread, and speak of childbirth like whether inevitable, painful, survivable most of the time. You hear the story of Lady Cecily who died on her wedding night. Too small, too young, they said. Her husband remarried within the month. The church blessed it. They always do. No one ever blames the man. You begin to understand something bone deep. The wedding night isn't a ceremony. It's a transaction. And your body was the coin. There's a priest who visits once a month to offer confession. You sit behind the lattice voice low and confess vague sins, impatience, envy, wandering thoughts. You never say what truly haunts you. You wouldn't know how. There are no words for shame that isn't yours, but still feels carved into your skin. Once you ask him if it's wrong to dread your husband's touch. There's a pause. Then he says, "A wife must submit for the good of the household." You leave the confessional colder than when you entered. You find solace in little things, the warmth of the kitchen hearth, when you sneak down for milk, the slow brushing of your hair by the maid who remembers you before you were wed, the smell of apple blossoms in spring. They don't erase the weight, but they lighten it briefly. One day your husband brings a dog, a hound, lean and quick-eyed. He gives it to you without ceremony. "Keep you company," he grunts. You kneel beside it, hands trembling, and the creature licks your fingers. For the first time in weeks, you smile without trying. You call him Alder. He follows you everywhere. Sleeps by the foot of your bed. Growls when your husband enters, though never loudly enough to be punished. You begin to whisper secrets into his fur silly ones, what you dreamt of as a child. How you once believed stars were holes poked in a black velvet sky. The dog becomes your only witness, and that makes him sacred. But nothing stays still in a castle. There's always movement. And when your body begins to change, when your monthly bleeding doesn't come, you're congratulated before you're even certain. The women grow more attentive. You're given different foods, different herbs. A midwife is summoned. She feels your belly with practiced hands and nods. "Heir," she says, as if that's your name now. The news spreads quickly. Your husband smiles for the first time in ages. He holds you that night, not out of affection, but possession. His hand on your stomach feels like a claim staked. Pregnancy becomes another kind of prison. You're watched constantly, told what to eat, how to sit, when to rest. You're not allowed to ride or walk alone. Even bathing is supervised. The nausea is relentless, the aches unending. Some days you cry without knowing why. The midwife says, "That's normal." But nothing about this feels normal. You miss bleeding. You never thought you would, but it was your only proof of self. Now your body is a house someone else moved into, and you're not even sure you're welcome in it anymore. Nights grow harder. You can't sleep comfortably. He still expects you to perform. No one tells him otherwise. The idea that a pregnant woman deserves rest is foreign. After all, you're already doing your job. Why stop now, then come the dreams? Strange, vivid things. Water teeth, blood in the sheets. You wake shaking. You tell no one. Sometimes the other women speak of their own dreams, of infants born with teeth of labors lasting days, of babies who never cried. They whisper these stories when the men aren't around. They laugh while they do it, but the laughter is tight. You start praying to saints you barely remember. Saint Margaret for safe childbirth. Saint Anne for strength, Mary for mercy. You light candles until the wax pools and crusts. And always you remember that first night, the way the door clicked shut, the way the air changed, the way your skin felt foreign to you. That was the night you stopped belonging to yourself. The midwife begins her preparations months in advance. Cloths, herbs, sharp knives, binding cords. She tells you that birth is a battlefield. You believe her. The men don't understand. To them, the danger lies in war, in sword and spear. But you know the truth, women bleed too. We just do it quietly, in rooms that smell of rosemary and fear. You wonder sometimes if the saints were real women, or just stories told to soothe us into obedience. If they too had wedding nights filled with silence and shame. You wonder if anyone ever escaped. There's a rumor about a girl from the northern coast who ran away before her wedding, disguised herself as a boy, took work on a ship. But the story ends badly. It always does, because women don't win by running. They survive by staying, by enduring. And you've learned how to endure. But tonight, lying beside your husband, belly full and back aching, you wish you had run. You trace the same pattern on the wall you traced on your wedding night. Saints and vines, still there, still watching. And you wonder what the girl beneath the veil would say if she saw you now. The third moon since the announcement passes and your belly begins to show. The way people look at you changes not in kindness, but in calculation. You are now the hope of a lineage, the womb in which titles, land, and legacy rest. Suddenly you are not just a wife, you are a vessel. Your name is rarely used anymore. The lady is with child, they say, as if that's all you've ever been. The priest visits again. This time he blesses you with holy water and chants in Latin while your husband stands proudly beside him. You wonder if the same water could wash away your dread. But nothing can. You feel it rooted deep in your spine in the way you rise slowly now, in the way the midwife's hand lingers a little longer each week on your stomach, her brow furrowing when she thinks you don't notice. The days grow heavy. Every sound, every echo in the stone halls seems amplified. You tire easily. Alder, your dog, senses your weariness and walks beside you more slowly now. The other women nod at you in passing knowing glances that speak more than words. Some were once in your place. Others are waiting for their turn. No one escapes it. In the garden, you find a small stone bench beside a flowering hawthorn. You begin to sit there each morning, pressing your palm to your stomach and murmuring little nothings. The flowers bloom and fall and bloom again. You lose count of how many times you've watched the petals drop. One day, an older woman joins you, Lady Aveline, silver-haired, stern-eyed. She doesn't speak at first, just sits beside you and stares ahead. Then softly, she says, "The first is the hardest." You look at her. Her face is lined like old parchment. She doesn't elaborate. She doesn't need to. You ask her if she remembers her wedding night. She nods once. "I tried to climb out the window afterward. Was caught by a maid. A breath, then a shrug. Didn't try again. No point." You ask her how she endured. She gazes at the garden wall where vines twist up the stone like green veins. "I told myself I was bigger than the night, that it would pass." And it did. She stands. until the next one came. You don't sleep much that night. The child inside you stirs often now, and your dreams are strange again. You see yourself in a mirror, older eyes hollow. In the dream, you hold a baby, but its face is blurred, always shifting. When you try to speak, your voice comes out in Latin. You wake in a sweat. The candles burn down to a stub. Your husband is away hunting. You are relieved. For a moment, your body feels like your own again. In his absence, you visit the laundry yard where the castle girls scrub linens in stone basins. You watch their hands move quickly, wringing and folding. One of them, no older than 12, glances at your belly and winces. She looks away quickly. You know what she's thinking, that this could be her in a year or two. You remember when you were that girl looking at noble women with their tight smiles and thick waists, wondering what they knew that you didn't. Now you know. Sometimes you hear them crying at night girls in the servant dormitories, muffling their sobs into straw-stuffed pillows. The castle has many shadows, and not all wedding nights involve feasts and priestly blessings. Some are taken without permission, others with quiet threats, but always the silence afterward, always the expectation to endure. You ask the midwife about herbs, not for birth, but for escape. She meets your eyes carefully, then shakes her head. Too risky, she whispers. For you and the babe. Her voice hardens. Besides, they'd know, and you'd not survive the knowing. So you stop asking. Instead, you begin writing. You steal bits of parchment, blunt quills, and make your marks in secret. Not proper letters, just symbols, patterns. A language only you understand. You hide them in the cracks behind the hearthstone. Little prayers not meant for saints, for yourself. On one paper you draw a bed, a great canopy bed like yours but empty, just sunlight spilling across the sheets. No blood, no weight, no watching eyes. The birth draws near. You are moved to the lying-in chamber, a smaller, warmer room prepared for labor. They cover the windows with thick cloth to keep out drafts and bad spirits. The walls are hung with tapestries of saintly mothers. The room smells of thyme and damp wool. Women come and go, sisters, midwives, old nurses. Your husband enters once, looks around awkwardly, and leaves. This is not his domain. This is the battlefield you were promised. Contractions begin. Dusk. They come slow at first, like ripples on a pond. You grip the edge of the bed and breathe. The midwife kneels beside you, murmuring things you can't hear. The room tilts. Hours pass, maybe days. Time unravels. You scream. You bite the cloth. You beg the saints. You claw at the wood. The pain is beyond anything your wedding night taught you. This is not submission. This is survival. Blood. So much blood. The midwife tells you not to look. You do anyway. You see a small face, blue and slick and furious with life. It's a boy. Everyone cheers. The midwife wraps him in linen. He cries. You don't. You lie back, hollowed out and barely conscious. They clean you, praise you, feed you broth with a silver spoon. The priest comes again to bless the child. He holds the infant like a chalice and mutters a prayer. You hear none of it. You are floating somewhere between pain and peace. The boy is placed beside you. You turn your head to look at him. And then for a moment your heart aches, not from fear or shame or ritual, but from something deeper. A flicker of love. Not because he's your husband's heir, not because he's a boy, but because he's small and alive and so very real. You touch his cheek. He blinks at you. And in that blink, you see the future, not castles or power, but cycles. More women, more nights, more silence. And you vow silently, fiercely, that you'll find a way to change it, even if it takes a lifetime. Your body is not your own, not yet. In the weeks that follow, you remain in the lying-in chamber. It is warm, dark, and thick with incense and sweat. The walls close in like a second skin. You are fed broths and potions and told to rest. Rest, they say, as though rest is a reward and not the bare minimum of recovery. But even rest is conditional here. Your sleep is shallow, your dreams still tangled with screams, and every ache, every groan is a reminder that you were torn open to create something that now feeds from you day and night. The women around you treat you like both relic and miracle. They speak in hushed voices, exchange looks, adjust your linens. They praise the boy's strength, his cry, his grip. No one asks how you feel. They assume the answer. Your husband visits once. He stands at the door with a goblet in hand, nods at the nurse holding your child, and says, "Good, a strong air." He doesn't look at you except to say, "You've done well, like you've completed a task, like you're a horse that finished the race." Then he's gone again off to the hall, to his cups, to his men. You return to your chamber only when they deem it safe. You are sore, still bleeding, still raw. The nurse brings the baby each time he cries. You feed him. You hold him. But your arms feel foreign, disconnected. Sometimes you stare at the wall instead of his face. Your hair begins to fall out, in clumps. You gather it silently and hide it under the bed. A servant girl, young and always wide-eyed, asks you what it's like to be a mother. You don't answer her. You just press your lips together, turn your gaze back to the child in your arms, and pretend not to hear. Motherhood here isn't a joy. It's another duty, another title. And it begins not with lullabies, but with blood and silence. As soon as your strength returns, they begin speaking of the next child. Not directly, but in suggestion. When the next one comes, they say, "He'll have a brother," they say. You haven't even healed, and already they speak of reopening the wound. The midwife tells you to rest now, because once the next one's growing, it'll be worse. You nod. You've learned to nod at everything. One day, as you walk in the corridor, slowly with your hand on the stone wall, you hear laughter behind a closed door. Your husband's voice and another, a woman's. Your stomach twists. You know what it means. Men are allowed appetites, even when their wives are recovering from childbirth, especially then. That night, you do not cry. You sit at the window, Alder asleep beside you, and look out across the fields. You wonder how many other women sit at other windows nursing the same ache. You wonder if they too tell themselves it will pass. You return to your writing. Now your secret parchments are filled with words. Not real sentences, not yet, but phrases, emotions, descriptions. You describe the first night again in brutal clarity as if writing it might remove it. You describe the birth not as miracle, but as war. You draw Alder. You draw your baby's face, one eye half closed, a soft curl falling across his brow. You write things you cannot say, that you wish you could run, that sometimes when your child cries you feel like disappearing, that you are not ungrateful, just exhausted, just lost. You wonder if this makes you wicked. You remember a story a nurse once told you of Saint Elspeth, who wept so hard during childbirth that angels came to her and held her wrists until the pain passed. You wonder where your angels were. A feast is held in the boy's honor when he reaches his third moon. The hall is filled with banners and musicians and roasted meat. Your husband beams. Your name is spoken often, but always in relation to him, mother of the air. Never simply you. You are seated beside your husband at the high table. The baby is passed around like a prized object. Look at his grip, the Baron says. He'll make a fine swordsman. You glance at the child in the knight's arms, and all you see is a small body still learning to focus its eyes. Not a warrior, not a lord, just a child. The pressure begins again. This time it's subtler but persistent. The glances, the whispers, the soft reminders from the priest that marriage must continue to be consummated even after birth. You feel your stomach tighten each time your husband looks at you a certain way. And one evening, he enters your room with that look again. You freeze. You try to speak to say you're still not ready, but he says nothing and proceeds anyway. There are no candles, no words. Just the rustling of fabric and your quiet surrender. Afterward, you lie awake while he sleeps, feeling the old ache bloom again. You begin to mark the days again, not with joy, but with dread. The castle continues on. There are banquets, hunts, prayers, sermons. Life resumes around you. The women continue their rituals, the men their games. You notice that the girls from the kitchens avoid you now. They don't want to see their future reflected in your eyes. Sometimes you walk in the chapel alone. The Virgin stares down at you from stained glass, her hands folded in serenity. You envy her. She at least had angels to explain her fate. You kneel, you whisper, not a prayer, a question. How much more? But there is no answer, only silence and flickering light. Your child grows quickly. He begins to crawl. He smiles when he sees you. That smile cuts you to the core, because he deserves joy and you fear you can't teach it. You don't know it anymore. One morning as you hold him at the window, you feel something shift. Not in your body, in your heart. You look down at his face and say aloud, "You will not become like him." You don't even realize you're speaking until the dog lifts his head. It's a vow, a fragile one, but a vow nonetheless. You begin to teach the child soft things, songs, shapes, the names of birds, not how to strike, but how to listen, not how to command, but how to notice. And in that act, something long buried stirs, hope, a small, stubborn thing, but growing, like a seed pressed into hard ground waiting for spring. Hope once ignited does not roar. It whispers. It flickers like a candle in a drafty hall. But you feel it delicate and defiant nestled somewhere behind your ribs, whispering that maybe, just maybe, there's something more than this. You begin to change how you move through the castle. You walk with your chin higher, not in arrogance but in resistance. A small resistance invisible to most. But inside you are rebelling. against the silence, against the expectation, against the slow erasure of your selfhood. The child, your son, begins to toddle. He calls you mama with a lopsided grin, teeth still coming in. It stirs something deep. Not the instinct they said you'd feel, not the blind devotion of the pious mother. It's fiercer than that. It's protective. It's a warning to the world, this one will not become what the others did. Not if you can help it. Your husband notices little. He grows more absorbed in his lands, his hunting dogs, his ledgers. He speaks to the steward more often than to you, which suits you. His distance is your reprieve. At night, you still lie beside him, stiff and watchful, waiting for his hand to move. Some nights it does. Others it does not. The waiting itself becomes a torment. You learn to wake before dawn, before the castle stirs. You rise, wrap yourself in a shawl, and slip to the chapel or the garden. Sometimes with your son on your hip, sometimes alone. The air is cold, clean. For those few minutes, the world feels untouched. You speak softly to the sky, not prayers, not exactly. Just thoughts let loose like birds. One morning you find the nursemaid asleep beside your son's cradle, mouth open, snoring gently. You smile for the first time in days. Then carefully you lift the child into your arms, wrap him, and step out into the corridor. You do not go far, just to the west gallery, where the tapestries are older than memory, and the light spills through the narrow windows like molten gold. You sit there on a worn bench, the child nestled against your chest, and you breathe. That's all. Just breathe. And for that moment, the castle recedes. The rules, the eyes, the weight, they all fall away. In the quiet, you start to imagine a world beyond the stone. You remember the traveling musicians who once came through the hall. One of them, a woman with a lute, sang a song in a tongue you didn't understand. The melody had a sadness to it, but also a wildness. You remember thinking she has no husband. She belongs to no one. She goes where she pleases. You'd envied her, still do. Later that week, you'd take a longer walk. Down to the stables where the grooms are brushing the horses. You keep your face serene, your pace slow. But inside your heart races. You're searching for cracks, for escape hatches. You're not a fool. You know you cannot flee. Not now. Not yet. But you can learn. Map the ways out. Note who speaks, who watches, who whispers. The cook's daughter offers you a plum. She's barely 10. She says, "You looked sad." You take it stunned by the simplicity of her words. You smile. Say thank you. The fruit is overripe and sweet. The juice runs down your wrist. You realize you haven't eaten something with your fingers in months. That night, your husband returns late. He smells of ale and cold wind. He doesn't speak. He strips off his boots and falls into bed. You lie beside him, staring at the beams, counting breaths. 5 in, 5 out. You think of the plum. You think of the tapestry in the West Gallery. You think of your son's warm breath against your neck. You think of running. It's not a plan. Not yet. But it's a seed. And seeds wait. The seasons shift. Summer fades. The wind grows sharper. The castle's stone begins to hold the chill longer each morning. Fires burn longer, blankets multiply. You are called to dine more frequently. Your presence matters now that you are the mother of a healthy heir. The barons, the knights, the clerics, they smile when they see you. The wives offer polite compliments. You've regained your figure. He's lucky, your lord. A good lady of the house. You nod, smile, say thank you. Inside you scream. No one sees it. That is your gift now. You've mastered the art of invisibly surviving. One evening after supper, your husband lifts a goblet and announces that he will seek another estate further north. For expansion, he says. For our son. There is cheering, clapping. You hear he'll be gone for weeks, and a strange joy unfurls in your chest. That night, you press your fingers to the stone windowsill and whisper, "Oh, quickly." You do not care if it's treason. When he leaves, you breathe freely again. The air in your chamber changes. Even the fire crackles louder. You sleep deeply for the first time in months. You wake and stretch like a cat in sunlight. You gather the nurses. You say you'll be handling your son's education directly. They raise their brows but do not protest. You begin teaching him your symbols, your songs, your drawings. He giggles as he repeats them. You write his name in the language you created behind the hearthstone. You smile at him and think this is the start. And still you wait. Wait for the day when the waiting ends. Your son begins to speak in full phrases, his words rolling awkwardly over his tongue, like new shoes that don't quite fit. He points to birds and asks questions you don't know how to answer, like, why do clouds follow us, and does God have a mother too? You laugh, sometimes real laughter, and realize it's been so long that the sound feels strange coming out of your throat, like a song you once knew by heart, but haven't sung in years. With your husband away, a new rhythm takes hold. Meals are quieter schedules, looser. You eat when you're hungry, not when the bells ring. You wear wool instead of stiff silk. You walk where you please. No one questions you, not yet. You notice things more sharply now, the sound of snow melting into the well bucket, the way the stonemason hums to himself, while fixing the chapel roof, the stories the maidens whisper as they sew. You soak it all in. The castle is still a cage, but the bars seem thinner somehow. You keep writing. Not just hidden scraps now, but fuller pages. Whole thoughts. You no longer write only what hurts. You write memories, your childhood, your favorite tree before it was cut down for firewood, the time your mother sewed a patch into your apron with thread dyed from crushed berries. You even write stories. One about a girl who escapes by hiding herself in plain sight. Another about a knight who forgets his sword and wins a battle with nothing but a lute. And when the candle burns low and your son is asleep and alder is curled beneath your chair, you whisper these stories aloud, quietly, as if the walls might carry them to other ears. Maybe they do. You begin to notice the other women. Really notice them. The kitchen girl with a limp, who always seems to disappear when the steward passes too close. The laundress who wears high collars even in summer. The lady's maid with red-rimmed eyes every Sunday morning. Their pain is quiet like yours was, hidden beneath duties and pleasantries. One afternoon, you find yourself in the still room where herbs are dried and balms prepared. The air is sweet and sharp with lavender and sage. You speak with the herb wife, an older woman with dark eyes and a voice like stone on stone. You ask about Poppy. She watches you carefully. For pain, she asks. You nod. She gives you a small packet. Hide it well. You do, not for yourself, not yet, but for the girl who will one day need it more. You're becoming someone else. Someone not just surviving, but seeing, remembering, preparing. A traveler passes through the castle one icy morning seeking warmth and food. He's a merchant or a bard, no one is quite sure. But he sings for his supper, and his voice fills the hall like golden smoke. He sings of far-off cities where women ride horses alone and speak to councils without asking permission. Places where a wedding night is just a celebration, not a crucible. Everyone chuckles. Fancies, someone says. But you do not laugh. You stare at him like he's a message sent from the very stars. Later in the passageway, you stop him. Ask where he learned the songs. He smiles and says, "From a woman in red who once escaped a tower." You don't know if it's truth or jest, but the words cling to you. You write them down, a woman in red who once escaped a tower. It becomes your new story. And then the day arrives. Your husband returns. The sound of hooves in the courtyard is enough to send you cold again. The old dread floods back as if it never left. You hold your son tighter. You smooth your gown. You paint the expression on your face like a mask. He enters the hall with noise and laughter and mud on his boots. He smells of road dust and wine. He kisses you brusquely, then lifts the boy in his arms and pronounces him taller. He'll be a fine lord, he says. Later that night, he comes to your chamber. You know what he expects. You endure. Again. And afterward you lie still, tears silent, rage louder than any scream. But this time there's no emptiness. There's fire. You will not forget this. The days after are stiff with routine. You smile when expected. You sit through prayers. You nod when plans are discussed. You do what you've always done. But now underneath you are building something. You teach your son to read symbols, the ones you invented. He doesn't know what they mean yet, but he mimics them eagerly. He thinks it's a game. You show him how to listen, not just to people, but to silences. One evening as you kneel in the chapel, you see Lady Aveline again. She sits beside you. A long silence passes before she whispers, "I see what you're doing." You do not answer. She nods. Good. Then she leaves. You begin meeting her in secret, in the still room, in the garden after dusk. She speaks in riddles and half-truths. She gives you names, places, stories from other keeps. She tells you of a woman who hid her daughters as boys and sent them to a monastery where they learned to read and write like clerics. She tells you of another who brewed an herb so strong it made her husband forget her name. Did they escape, you ask? Some, she says. You don't need more than that. Some is enough. You start storing herbs yourself. Just a few. You label them in your symbols. You keep them in a wooden box hidden beneath loose stones in the hearth. One night your son wakes from a nightmare. He calls for you. You rush to him, hold him, whisper soft words into his damp hair. He says, "I dreamt a monster took you away." You press your lips to his forehead. "I'm not going anywhere," you whisper, and you mean it. Because now you're not surviving for yourself. You're surviving for him, For every girl who stares at a veil and thinks it means a beginning, you know the truth, but maybe, just maybe, you can rewrite the ending. The winter is bitter. Ice clings to the windows like frost-bitten lace, and the castle groans under the weight of snow-laden stone. Fires are stoked constantly, but the chill seeps through the walls into your bones. You wrap your son in layers and keep him close, his small hands always cold, always searching for yours. You think of the chill that settled into your own body on that first wedding night, how it never truly left, only changed shape. Your husband grows restless in the cold. With no wars to fight or hunts to lead, he prowls the halls, speaking sharply to servants and drinking before noon. His presence is a heavy fog. You move around it as best you can, graceful, invisible, rehearsed. When he calls for you, you go. When he's silent, you stay away. Sometimes you wonder what your life would have been had he been kind. And then you hate yourself for the wondering. You don't want kindness from a cage. A servant girl vanishes from the kitchens. You hear whispers she was with child, not by choice. No one says the man's name, but everyone knows. There is no inquiry, no justice. The girl is simply gone, replaced within a week as if she were a broken spoon or spilled oil. That night you dream of running again. But this time you aren't alone. In your arms is your child, and behind you a fire burns your chamber, your veil, your wedding bed. All of it gone. Ash. You wake with your heart pounding and the dream burned into your skin. You add it to your writing. The dream, the ash, the weight of a child in your arms as you flee. In the margins, you scrawl a question. What would it cost to leave the next morning? You find Alder, your old hound, struggling to rise. His legs are weak now, his eyes dim. He's been with you since that first night, a quiet guardian. You sit beside him on the cold stones, stroking his head. When he passes that evening, you bury him near the hawthorn tree. You do not cry in front of the others. But that night, with the baby asleep, you press your face into your arms and weep for the dog who saw everything and judged nothing, who bore witness to your pain and guarded your silence. Spring arrives slowly, dripping into the world like melted wax. Snow becomes slush, slush becomes mud, and eventually, the crocuses push through the muck like little fists. The castle breathes easier. The windows are opened again. Sunlight returns. But the light does not touch the shadows in your heart. Your son is growing fast. He asks questions now that startle you. Why can't women ride into battle? Why don't you go hunting like father? Why do you sometimes look sad, even when you smile? You answer gently, truthfully, but in pieces, not because he cannot understand, but because you want him to grow into the answers. You begin teaching him things no other lady would dare. How to notice when someone's quietness is really pain. How to read people's faces as well as books. How to treat silence as sacred, not as weakness. He listens. He's learning. You tell him stories, not the ones written by scribes or chanted by priests. Your stories of girls who run, of women who endure, of knights who lay down their swords and listen instead. He listens with wide eyes and calls them his favorites. You're shaping him, and in doing so, you're reshaping yourself. Lady Aveline becomes a constant presence. Sometimes she says nothing for hours, just sits beside you in the gallery or walks with you along the ramparts. Her silences are full. weighty, healing. One day she tells you a story. Her story. She was once betrothed to a man she despised. He smelled of meat and spoke with his mouth full. Her father insisted. She married him at 15. On her wedding night, he drank too much and passed out in the chair. She fled to the chapel and stayed there all night, praying not to be punished for the defiance. The next morning, he mocked her, said he preferred the waiting, that he liked fear. He beat her 2 weeks later for laughing too loudly. She stayed with him for years. He died on a hunting trip thrown from a horse. She never remarried. I found peace, she says, simply only after his absence. You ask her if peace is always a matter of waiting. She looks at you long and hard. No, she says. Sometimes it's made. The words stick. You begin to test the boundaries again. You speak more firmly in court. You question decisions. You speak up for the servants when they're blamed unfairly. Your husband scolds you once in front of the steward. You do not lower your gaze. You match his eyes until he looks away. That night, he doesn't come to your chamber, and you sleep soundly. You teach your son how to write your symbol language. He picks it up quickly. Soon you're passing notes between his chambers and your messages only you two can understand. You write him riddles. He replies with answers. He writes, "What is stronger than a sword, but lighter than a feather?" You write back a woman's will. He beams. Lady Evelyn laughs when you show her. The boy will grow into a dangerous kind of man, she says. One with ears. You nod. That's the point. One evening you catch your reflection in a basin of still water. You study your face. There are new lines there. Your eyes are tired, but they are not hollow. Not anymore. The veil from your wedding day still lies folded in a chest at the foot of your bed. You take it out. You stare at it. So much silk for so much silence. You carry it to the fire. You watch it burn. And in its ashes you see the next chapter begin. The veil burned quietly. No spectacle, no ceremony. Just flame and fabric curling into itself and vanishing into soot. And afterward the room smelled of smoke and silk like a truth finally spoken after years of holding your breath. No one asked what happened to it. No one ever asked about your things, only your role, your womb, your silence, but you felt it. The shift. It wasn't freedom yet, not even close, but it was motion. A ripple in still water, and ripples grow. The change inside you starts to seep outward. You move with more intent now, less like a ghost, more like a presence. When the steward frowns at you for asking too many questions about grain stores, you hold his gaze until he mumbles a reply. When a visiting nobleman praises your husband and jokes that he must ride you as well as he rides his new horse, you smile cold, precise, and say, "That explains why both of us limp." The room freezes. Your husband laughs too loudly, too quickly. You never say such a thing again, but everyone remembers that you did. Whispers start. Not cruel ones, curious ones. The lady has wit. The lady has teeth. She was quiet once, but not anymore. The nurses are careful not to speak openly, but you hear it in the way they refer to you when they think you're not listening. She's not like the others, one of them says. There's something burning in her. They're right. You start visiting the servants' quarters more frequently, not as a lady inspecting, but as a listener. You learn their names, their losses, their fears. They speak in fragments at first, then in full stories. You don't offer comfort, you offer presence. That's enough. One girl no more than 14 confesses she's been promised to a man she's never met. She's terrified. You give her herbs, not to end her fate, but to calm her body when the time comes. You teach her how to breathe through fear. You tell her gently what no one told you. It's not your fault if it hurts. She weeps. You hold her. For a moment you are not noble and servant. You are woman and woman. Later you write about her. Her name, her story, her shoulders trembling beneath your hands. You hide it behind the hearth with the others. A quiet archive of pain and endurance. Your husband grows restless again. The steward suggests a hunting trip. He agrees. You smile when you hear it. 3 weeks, perhaps 4. Time to breathe. You use the time well. Lady Aveline brings you a visitor, an old woman in a blue cloak who speaks little and watches everything. She's a healer, perhaps something more. You're never told directly, but she asks questions that startle you. Do you remember the moment you stopped believing you'd be saved? You answer, I remember the exact breath. She nods. Then we begin there. Over the next days, she teaches you things. Not magic, though it feels like it. Herbs, symbols, the difference between what is healing and what is hiding. She gives you a book hand-bound full of drawings and strange script. Learn it, she says. You'll know when to use it. You hide the book, but you study it. Each night, once the child sleeps, you light a small lamp and trace the symbols with your finger. Some make your hands tingle. Others feel like old memories. Aveline warns you. This knowledge is dangerous. You reply, so is obedience. Outside spring deepens. The hawthorn blooms again. You sit under it and think of alder buried beneath its roots. You whisper to him. Silly things. Sweet things. He cannot hear you. But maybe something greater does. One morning your son presents you with a gift. It's a stone smooth and round, painted with your secret symbol. I made it for you, he says proudly. So you don't forget. You hold the stone like it's a crown. Later, you place it inside your writing box, not hidden, resting atop the parchments like a seal. The castle receives guests again. A marriage alliance is being discussed. You are expected to host. You do so flawlessly. The hall is warm with candles, the food expertly prepared, the servants well coordinated under your quiet direction. But you feel the pressure again. The guests speak of sons and heirs and alliances, of strong ladies bearing stronger sons. They ask if you'll be giving your husband another. You smile thinly. Not tonight. They laugh. You don't. After the feast, you walk alone through the dark corridors. Your feet know the way. You could find every torch bracket, every uneven flagstone with your eyes closed. In the stillness, you wonder if you ran, now just walked out past the gates and into the woods. How long would it take for them to notice too long, or not long enough? Instead, you go to the chapel, kneel. You don't pray. You haven't in months, maybe years. But you speak, not to God, but to every woman who's knelt here before you. I am not the end of your story, you whisper. I am its reckoning. You light a candle, not in hope, in promise. You walk back to your chamber, open your writing box, and take out a clean sheet. You begin writing something new, not a memory, not a wound, but a plan. The first line of the plan is simple. Wait until the harvest festival. It's the one time of year when the castle empties. Nobles flock to the fields for processions, to the village for spectacle. Servants scatter like birds off to visit their kin or drink themselves numb on fermented cider. Even your husband, whose presence lingers like smoke, disappears into the revelry. The festival is chaos, but it's also cover. You begin preparing in increments. Not openly, never all at once. You ask for a new satchel to be stitched for your son's toys, you say. You order dried meat, hard cheese, small flasks of wine for festival offerings, you tell the cook. You gather linens and cloaks and a spare pair of boots. Every item is hidden with precision. Not in your chamber, not behind the hearthstones where the parchments live, but in the abandoned dovecote beside the north wall. No one visits it anymore. Not since the last birds were taken for stew during last year's famine. Its roof leaks, but its stones are sound. It's yours now. Lady Aveline helps in silence. She offers no praise, only occasional warnings. If they catch you, they won't ask questions. You nod. You know. That's why you've planned not only for flight, but for erasure. You'll vanish. Leave no trail. Leave no wife to punish, no mother to strip of title. You've written a letter, not to your husband, nor to any noble. To your son it begins. If you are reading this, then I am free. It is sealed, marked with the symbol only he knows. You do not tell him what it means. Not yet. But one day you will. In the evenings, you walk the outer curtain wall. The guards nod respectfully. You are the lady of the house. No one questions your gaze. You count steps, note shifts, mark weaknesses. You study the gate schedule. You speak to the stable boy, ask about the quietest horses, the most sure-footed. One day he tells you there's a new mare, dark, quiet, quick. She doesn't spook. You ask for her to be readied for the festival parade. I'd like to ride again. You tell your husband with a pleasant smile. It's been too long. He nods, distracted, more focused on the meat in his teeth than on you. He forgets within the hour. You write another list. This one only in your head. You stop bleeding. The first missed moon stirs panic. Not again. Not now. You mix herbs into your tea. Pray not to saints, but to your own rage. The bleeding returns 3 days later. You bury the soiled cloth behind the dovecote along with your relief. The day before the festival, you test your son. You sit him down, point to your symbol. What does this mean, you ask? He answers proudly, it's our secret. It means truth. You nod. What do you do if someone tries to take you without asking? He looks down. Fidgets. I shout. I run. I find the hawthorn tree. And if I'm not there, I wait, he says. I wait with the stone. You press your palm to his. Good. You don't want him to need this knowledge. But the world does not care what you want. That night, you don't sleep. You lie beside your husband, who snores softly, unaware. You watch the shadows crawl across the ceiling patterns you've memorized. This will be your last night in this bed, with its 4 posts and carved saints, with its cold sheets and colder memories. You trace the seam in the mattress where the straw has thinned. You whisper, goodbye. The morning of the festival dawns gold and bright. The castle buzzes with motion. Cloaks are laid out, flags unfurled. The kitchens are a symphony of clanging pans and shouted orders. You dress in layers. Sturdy boots beneath your gown. A sash that hides a knife. Not for violence. For vines, for rope, for desperation. You hold your son's hand as you descend the stairs. You smile as people wish you joy. You laugh gently at their stories. You are perfect. A vision. You attend the opening procession mounted on the quiet mare, your son riding before you on a pony. Your husband drinks and boasts and slaps the steward on the back. No one watches you closely. No one sees your gaze drift toward the dovecote. When the sun reaches its peak, you pretend to feel faint. The heat, you say. I need rest. You retreat to your chambers. A maid follows. You dismiss her with kindness. You shut the door. Wait. Count to 100. Then move. Down the servants' stairs, through the herb garden, into the dovecote. Everything is there. You shed your gown, pull on trousers, a tunic, a cloak. Wrap your hair, shoulder the bag. Take only what matters. You retrieve your son from the edge of the orchard where he's waiting with a small wooden toko. He doesn't ask questions. He just follows. Together you move toward the gate. You've timed it. The guard there is the cook's cousin. He knows nothing of your plan, only that you once brought his daughter Poppy tea for cramps. That kindness is enough. He nods, opens the gate, does not look back. You lead the mare into the woods. The canopy swallows you whole. The castle disappears behind you like mist. No shouts. No horns. Not yet. You ride until the light changes, until the sounds of the world soften. You do not cry. You do not speak. You are not afraid. Not anymore. You are a woman who burned her veil. You are a mother who left before the bruises reached the child. You are not saved. You are saving yourself. And somewhere behind you, deep in that stone cage, a wedding bed grows cold. Night falls slowly like ink spilling over parchment. You and your son sleep in the brush beneath a canopy of pine. The mare is tethered quietly nearby, cropping moss in the dim hush. Your son curls beside you, wrapped in your cloak, trusting the darkness because he trusts you. That is a power no ceremony could bestow, earned in silence, in patience, in all the nights you held him, while hiding your pain. You don't sleep much. Every rustle feels louder. Every owl call a summons. You hold your knife beneath the blanket blade flat against your thigh, not because you expect to use it, but because you need to remember that you could. That you're no longer powerless. At dawn, you rise with the fog. Your joints ache from the ground, but you're lighter than you've ever felt. You made it through the first night. You don't stop to celebrate. You move. You take the lesser-known paths, the ones marked not by signs, but by memory and instinct. Lady Aveline had spoken of a stream, one that fed into the old Roman road. You find it by midday, cold and swift, its banks lined with blue wildflowers. You follow it like a thread. You wash your face in the water. Let your son drink. He complains of the cold. You smile and tell him cold water means no poison. He nods like he understands. You've brought only what you need, 2 days of food dried and hard, a skin of wine, 2 small flintstones, and the bundle of parchment, your writings. You couldn't leave them behind, not just because they're your truth, but because one day your son must read them. He must know. That night you light a small fire. He sleeps in your lap. You whisper him another story, one you haven't told aloud before. A story about a girl who married a shadow and lived in a cage made of silence, until the day she taught her child to listen to the wind, and together as they climbed into the sky. When you finish, he's already asleep, but you feel your own words settle in your bones like armor. The next few days are harder. You're sore, tired. The mare begins to limp from a loose stone caught in her hoof. You find a place to rest, pick the hoof, clean, massage the leg, as you once watched the stable hands do. Your son is hungry more often. The food dwindles. You find wild onions, nettles, not much but enough. You boil them in the tin pot you tied beneath your satchel. The steam rises bitter and earthy. You tell him it's a nobleman's feast. He grins. On the 4th day, the first sign of danger arrives. You hear riders, not close but near enough that you feel it in your chest. You hide in a thicket covering the mare's nose with your cloak to keep her quiet. Your son clutches your hand. His breathing is quick. You press your forehead to his and whisper, "Be the stone." It's something you taught him early, how to go still, how to disappear. The riders pass. 3 of them. Livery you recognize. They don't stop. They don't see. You wait until sunset to move again. You cross the old road, taking care to leave no tracks in the soft mud. The parchment you've kept is now wrapped in waxed cloth buried beneath your spare tunic. You can't lose it, because it's more than writing now. It's your proof, your witness, your soul. At a small village 2 days farther on, you trade the mare. It wounds you, but she's grown lame again, and it's clear she won't carry you much farther. The smith eyes your hands noble soft, despite your journey. "Run away," he mutters. You meet his gaze. Say nothing. He studies your son, then your face. Finally, he nods. The brown donkey's slow, but it doesn't ask questions. You nod back. Neither do I. That night in the hayloft above the inn stable, you cry, for the first time since you fled. Not for your husband, not for the castle, but for Alder. For the girl you were when you arrived at that stone prison. For the one who didn't know what was coming. You cry and then you sleep. The donkey is slow, but he moves. The path grows clearer. You begin hearing of a place, a woman-run convent far to the south, tucked in a forest where no road leads directly. They say it was founded by a widow who refused to remarry. A woman who once lived in a palace but now tills the soil. They say she takes in women. Women with stories that can't be told in daylight. You begin aiming south. You meet others along the way. A washerwoman fleeing a violent lord. A girl disguised as a boy who sharpens knives in the markets. A midwife who lost her license after refusing to silence a woman's pain. You don't travel together long, but in each meeting you feel stronger. This is not a world built for women who refuse to yield, but there is a world beyond the one built for you. You see it in the forest paths. You hear it in the wind. You carry it in your son's questions, and in the pages wrapped tight against your heart. The worst of your wedding night was not the blood, not the ache, not the silence. It was the belief that it had to be that way, that it always would be. Now you know better, and you walk forward, one step at a time, out of the cage, toward whatever waits. You are not saved, you are becoming. The convent lies beyond the forest, farther south than you expected, tucked between the curve of a river and a ridge of stone hills. You wouldn't have found it without the herbalist woman you met in the village of Izmir, the one with the limp and the dark eyes. She looked at you, your child, your donkey, your silence, and she knew. She gave you a direction, a name, Sister Rhine. She said nothing more, just nodded, pressed a small pouch of rosemary into your hand, and sent you on your way. You travel for 3 more days. The weather turns warm, the trees heavy with early blossoms. Spring sings from every branch. But your body aches. Your limbs are weary from walking, your feet blistered, and your son grows impatient, asking when you'll get there, more than once each hour. Still you move forward, because you have no other direction left, only this one. You reach the river just before sundown. A small wooden bridge arches across it, covered in moss and slick with mist. Across the bridge, the world quiets. Birdsong fades. The trees grow taller, older. The path becomes narrow, barely trodden. You begin to wonder if it was all a tale. Just another story. Just another thread to keep hope dangling over emptiness. And then, at the edge of a clearing, you see it. Not a grand building. No bell tower, no stained glass windows. Just a simple stone hall wrapped in ivy and guarded by silence. A garden sprawls beside it, half wild, full of cabbages, herbs, and flowering shrubs. And women, 6 of them, moving among the beds, digging, planting, laughing softly. One looks up as you approach. She sees your eyes. Then your son. Then the donkey. She nods just once, as if to say, yes. You're expected. You enter the convent grounds like someone walking into another life. Sister Rain is older than you imagined. Wrinkled, sun-darkened her eyes like weathered glass. She says nothing for a long while as you explain not everything, just enough. She listens without blinking, without interrupting. And when you finish, she places one hand on your wrist and says the first words that make your throat burn. You're safe here. You don't believe her. Not entirely. But something inside you starts to loosen. Your son is taken to the garden with the other children. Yes, there are others, and you are given clean water, clean clothes, a space to sleep. No one asks your real name. No one asks about your husband. There is no veil here. No bed prepared by others. No eyes watching. Just women and work. You begin again. The routine is slow, earthy. You wake with the sun, help grind flour, sweep the paths, learn to identify herbs, not from books, but from scent and feel. The days are honest. You move your body not for survival, but for living. At night, the women gather in the main room. They read aloud psalms, poems, stories. Some tell their own tales in pieces, not all at once, but enough to say, I survived too. You do not speak for a while. You just listen. One evening, your son falls asleep in your lap while a woman with ink-stained fingers reads from a scroll. The fire crackles. The room smells of rosemary and wax. And suddenly, the tears come, without warning. A flood. You do not run from them. You let them come. Afterwards, Sister Rhine gives you a blank scroll and a pot of ink. You've been writing in secret, she says. Now write in the open. So you do. You write everything. Not just pain. Not just memory. You write what might have been. What still could be. You write the story of the girl who married a shadow and the child who led her into light. You write of Alder. You write of Aveline. You write of the night you left. And when your son is old enough, you let him read it. He reads slowly, lips moving. When he finishes, he asks, "Was that really you?" You answer, "It still is." He hugs you hard, and you understand something profound. You were not only escaping the past, you were shaping the future. The women at the convent begin asking for your stories. You share them bit by bit, carefully. But each time you speak, another woman steps forward and tells hers. A new archive is built, not in books, but in voices. You bind your writings together with twine, not to publish, not for pride, but for preservation. Because history forgets women like you, unless you insist. Your son thrives. He becomes strong not in arm, but in heart. He defends the smaller children, helps in the garden, sings when no one is watching. One day he finds a broken bird beneath the rose bush. He cups it in his hands, gently carries it to you. You nurse it. It flies again. He watches, eyes wide. And you think this is how the world changes. Not in thrones and banners, but in hands that choose to heal instead of strike. One evening, years later, Sister Rhine sits beside you and says, "You could lead us, you know." You laugh. "I've never led anything." She looks at you. You led yourself out, and you realize she's right. You're not a wife anymore, not a prisoner, not even just a mother. You're a story that refused to stay quiet, and you're not done being written. Spring gives way to a soft summer, the kind that glows rather than burns. The convent's gardens hum with bees, and the wild mint spreads like laughter along the edge of the stone path. Your days are filled with work, but not labor in the old sense. There's no performance here. No one watching you, measuring you, reminding you of what you owe. The work is a rhythm now, kneading bread, harvesting beans, boiling herbs, teaching children. You wear simple linen, rough but breathable, and for the first time in your life, no one laces you into anything. The sensation of freedom is strange. Not a sudden thing, but a slow unfolding. At first you kept your back straight, and your voice soft, expecting at any moment for someone to pull you back into the past. But no hands reach, no eyes narrow in suspicion. And so, bit by bit, you begin to unfurl. You catch yourself laughing. Real laughter, not the polite chuckle expected of a lady at court, but full and ugly and loud. Aveline would be proud. Your son climbs trees now. His hands are calloused, his legs strong. He no longer asks when you'll return home because this is home. And when he draws, he no longer uses your old secret symbols, he invents his own. Sometimes you find scraps of parchment beneath your pillow, with a sun drawn in spiral rays, or a rabbit with a crooked crown. You post one of them on the wall beside your cot. In time, the sisters entrust you with teaching, the younger ones girls who arrived the way you once did, barefoot, bruised, barely believing that anything could ever feel safe again. You begin by teaching them to breathe, then to walk again, not with their heads down, but forward, then to speak, then to write. One girl, Juna, refuses to talk at all for weeks. She flinches at the sound of raised voices, but she watches you closely. You see yourself in her. One evening after most have gone to sleep, you hand her your old writing box. Inside all your symbols, stories, and scrolls. This is yours now, you say. She doesn't reply, but she opens the lid. Her fingers linger on the ink. That night she stays beside you while you tend to the candles. She begins to hum. That is her beginning. The days stretch. Years pass. You receive news sometimes delivered by the rare merchant or pilgrim who comes through the forest path. Some bring rumors of noblemen hunting for a runaway wife. Others mention wars brewing in the north. But none know your name, and those who might don't speak it. You are safe, or safer than you've ever been. And yet there's still a question in you, a knot that refuses to untangle. What happened to Aveline? You've wondered every night since you left. Wondered if the rumors reached your husband, if he punished the women who remained, if he suspected her, if she's even alive. You've thought of returning, not to stay, just to see. But the risk is too great. Still, the ache lingers. One autumn evening, a woman arrives at the convent gates. Her hair is streaked with gray. Her shoulders are stooped, but her eyes, you would know them anywhere. Lady Aveline. You run to her. She lets herself be held, just for a moment. Then she says, "You did it." You nod, words don't come. She stays a week and doesn't speak much of what happened, only says, "After you vanished, everything broke open. Your husband searched for a time, sent riders, offered rewards. But he tired of it quickly. His pride wouldn't let him chase a woman who dared say no." She pauses, adds, "He took another wife, very young. She doesn't speak much." You feel your stomach twist. Then she says, "But the steward is kinder now. And your old maid, she's gone to live with her sister in the village. People talk less of punishment these days, more of warning." You nod again. "What of the boy?" she asks. You call him over. He's taller now, lean, bright-eyed, curious. He bows awkwardly, then grins. Aveline chuckles. "He'll change things. I'm trying to teach him to, you say." "He's already watching you," she replies. That's how it begins. She leaves in the night, refusing a horse or escort. She says, "I've walked alone for years. I think I prefer it." You hold her tightly. "Thank you," you whisper. She smiles. "No," she says. "Thank you." After she's gone, the ache in your chest softens. You return to the rhythm of the convent, but something inside you is brighter now. One night your son asks, "Why don't the women here wear veils?" You laugh gently. "Because no one owns us." He thinks for a moment, then asks, "Not even God?" You look at the stars above the orchard, their cold glitter far away and patient. God, you say slowly, doesn't ask for veils. He asks for truth. The boy nods, then says, "So do you." You smile. You think of the girl you were, on that first night, on that white sheet, in that cold bed. And you whisper not to your son, but to her, "We made it." The wind changes as winter returns. You feel it first in your hands while drawing water from the well, your knuckles stinging your breath thick in the morning air. The garden dies back into roots and frost-bitten stalks. The sisters tuck the last of the rosemary into dry cloth bundles, hang lavender from the beams. Your son gathers firewood without being asked now. He's taller, quieter too, thoughtful in a way most boys are not allowed to be. He watches the world with a hunger you recognize not for power, but for meaning. One evening, while cleaning the old parchments, he finds one of your early stories. The one about the girl and the shadowed castle. He reads it silently at the table while you knead bread. When he finishes, he sets it down gently as though it might break. "Was that real?" he asks. You dust your hands on your apron. You meet his eyes. "Yes." He doesn't ask more. He nods and you know something has shifted. A door inside him has opened quietly and forever. You let the silence stretch between you. Not every story needs explanation. Some just need to be believed. That winter, a storm hits hard. Heavy snow buries the hills. The convent becomes a cocoon, a quiet cave of wood smoke and wool and stories. You and your son sleep close to the fire. You read to him from your book of symbols, now worn soft by years of fingers. The girls you once taught are women now. Some stay. Others move on with coin in hand and knowledge in their blood. One goes to a nearby village to become a healer. Another takes up ink and parchment and begin copying texts for the monks in secret. Their names are whispered beyond the walls, now women who know things, women who do not bow. And you become something new too. Not just a survivor, not just a teacher, but a keeper of memory. One night, one of the younger sisters wakes screaming from a dream. You're there before she can cry again. You kneel beside her cot and hold her while she sobs. "I saw my wedding night," she chokes. "It was dark. There was blood." You stay with her until her breath slows. Then you say, "It wasn't your fault." She shakes her head. "It wasn't your sin," you continue. "It was theirs." Her eyes meet yours. You say it again slower this time. "It was never your sin." Something in her face changes. You recognize the look. You wore it once. The first time someone told you the truth wasn't what they said it was. The next morning she joins you in the still room, helps grind dried herbs with a heavy stone. She doesn't speak, she doesn't have to. The knowledge is passed on quietly, like bread between hands. You start keeping a second book, not for stories, for names. Not real names always, but true ones, titles chosen by the women themselves. The girl who left with her hands unbroken. She who chose silence but never surrender. Mother without permission. Aveline the Watcher. You add a name for your son, too. Not because he suffered what you did, but because he saw it and chose differently. He who listens. That winter Sister Rain grows ill. Her breath comes short. Her hands tremble. The other sisters begin to hover, but she waves them away. One day she asks for you. You sit beside her cot where the afternoon sun spills over the blankets. She takes your hand. Her grip is still strong. "I knew you'd come," she says. You shake your head, smiling. "You didn't even know my name." "I didn't need to. I saw your eyes. I've seen them before." You sit in silence for a while, the kind that isn't empty, but full of everything unsaid. Finally, she says, "Take the archives. Make them bigger. Don't let them forget." You nod. She dies 2 days later. The sisters bury her beneath the hawthorn tree. You cry for her, not for the loss she had peace, but for what she gave you and what she trusted you to carry. Spring arrives again. The convent sings with light, and you begin building. Not just stories, not just names, a legacy. You send letters to other safe places, coded, careful always in your old symbol language. You invite the women who were never invited, not to speak if they can't, but to be seen, to exist. Some come, many don't. But the stories begin arriving, wrapped in cloth, scratched into bark, etched into bone, hidden in the hems of cloaks. You read them. You weep for them. You archive them. The walls of your little library grow heavy with truth. And in your heart you begin to understand you are not the girl who escaped the wedding night. You are the woman who builds the world after it. Years pass not in the rush of battle or the ticking of clocks, but in the soft repetition of seasons, the gentle cycles of planting, growing, harvesting, and resting. Your hair begins to silver at the temples. Lines draw themselves softly across your face, but not from sorrow, from sun, from smiling, from surviving. Your son is nearly grown now, tall with hands calloused from work and eyes that see the world like pages waiting to be read. He teaches the younger children in the garden. He sharpens tools, mends cloaks, and reads aloud each evening, his voice steady, patient. Sometimes he recites the stories you wrote. Sometimes he tells his own. One night you find a new parchment tucked into your pillow. It begins, "There once was a boy raised by women who carried fire in their bones." You cry as you read it. He never says it's about you, but you know. The archive grows. You've outgrown the old still room, so you and 2 others, one of them, the girl who once couldn't speak, begin converting the abandoned west barn. You build shelves, sort scrolls, bind pages into rough volumes. The stories no longer hide. They rest proudly now, side by side, like sisters who've shed their veils. A woman arrives at the convent, face covered by a hood, clothes too fine for a peasant. You recognize the walk, the tightness in her shoulders. You offer her tea, say nothing. She stays 3 weeks, never speaks her name. Before she leaves, she whispers, "He died." And I didn't cry. You answer, "That is your freedom." She kisses your hand and walks into the forest. Another girl comes barely 12, found in a churchyard wrapped in nothing but a blood-stained shift. The sisters bring her to you. She won't speak, won't eat, just rocks slightly and stares. You sit beside her each evening, sharing space without words. On the 7th night, she reaches for your hand. That's all. Just a touch. But it's enough. You add her story to the archives. Not the full tale, just a symbol. A hand reaching in darkness. She stays, learns, begins again, and the pattern continues. Not like a tapestry too orderly for that. More like a wild hedge growing in every direction, thorned and blooming. Your community becomes a myth whispered beyond the forest. A place where women go and do not return, not because they are lost, but because they are found. You receive letters sometimes written by men, kind ones, curious ones, apologetic ones. They want to know the stories. They want to teach their daughters better. You answer the ones who ask without pride. You send copies of the archives, carefully selected, no names, just truths. And each time you wonder, what if someone had written back when you were still dreaming in a castle tower, brushing your hair and pretending that silence was safety? One morning you climb the hill overlooking the convent. The air is sharp, clear. You sit beside the hawthorn tree, older now, twisted beautifully with age. Beneath it lies Alder the dog who never left your side in your darkest nights. Beneath it too lies Sister Rain, the woman who gave you your second birth. You whisper to both of them, "I kept my promise." Then you open the book you're still writing. You begin the next page. Not the end. There is no end. Because every girl who escaped her wedding night, every woman who tore off her veil, every child born into a world that refuses to see them, they live here. In these words, in these shelves, in you. You read the first story again, the one you wrote all those years ago in the freezing chamber, where your husband first claimed what was never his. It ends with this line: she was never saved. She simply refused to disappear. You cross it out. You write, she rose. The convent is no longer a secret. Not in the dangerous way secrets hide trembling in the dark. It's a secret in the way stars are a quiet truth for those who look up. Travelers whisper of it to one another in kitchens and roadside inns. Mothers tuck its name into bedtime stories. Daughters dream of it before they ever understand why. Some say the women there are witches. Others say they're saints. You know better. They're survivors, builders, keepers of memory. Midwives to the futures denied to them. You no longer fear being found. If your name is spoken in the outside world now, it is not with condemnation, it is with curiosity, perhaps even reverence. The girl who vanished, the wife who left, the woman who taught others how to leave. One afternoon, your son, now a man in his own right, comes to you beneath the orchard trees. He's carrying a bundle of scrolls, his cheeks flushed. There's a town near the coast, he says. They've built a house for women like us. They want copies of our archive. You raise an eyebrow. Like us. He smiles. You know what I mean. He means free. You press a hand to his shoulder. Go. Take what they need. He leans in and kisses your forehead. No man has kissed you with such tenderness since your father. Before the veil, before the wedding night, before the silence. You watch him ride off down the dirt path, a satchel at his hip, scrolls on his back, and no sword on his belt. Later that day, you sit beside Juna, the once voiceless girl, now grown into a tall, watchful woman, with ink on her hands and a spine of steel. She's copying your first stories onto finer parchment, preserving them against time. She pauses. How do you want it to end? You blink. What? The book. The first one. How does her story end, you consider? The woman who was married against her will. The girl who bled on white sheets while servants waited outside the door. The mother who ran. The teacher. The keeper. How does her story end, you smile? It doesn't, you say. Juna nods. Good. And she writes those words on the final page. It doesn't. The sun filters through the window. You look down at your hands, worn and calloused. You stretch your fingers. They still work, still write, still carry, still lift. In the evening, you light candles at the altar, not to saints carved by men, but to the nameless women who never had a grave. You speak their stories aloud, one by one, slowly, as the flames flicker. You speak the story of a girl in a bridal veil who once stared up at the ceiling beams and thought the world ended at her wedding bed. You speak the story of the woman who taught her child to read symbols, not just words. You speak the story of the lady who stayed behind in a castle, who passed herbs in silence, who made your escape possible. And when you finish, you blow out the candle. There is no need to pray. You are the prayer. That night in your room, you open the archive once more. You remove a fresh page. You dip the quill. And you begin to write again. Because stories like yours were never meant to end. They were meant to echo. And every time a woman refuses to disappear, the echo grows louder, until no one can ignore it, until no one can silence it, not even time. And now take a deep breath. Let it all go, the stone walls, the cold sheets, the veils and the vows. Let the shadows of that castle dissolve into the night, along with the heavy silence that held so many voices still for so long. You are not there. You are here. And here you are safe. You've walked beside someone who was never meant to survive, and yet she did. You've seen her rise not in fire or fury, but in footsteps. Quiet ones, persistent ones. She taught herself to breathe again, to write again, to speak truth where truth had been buried. And now she sleeps peacefully, no longer beneath banners or duty, but under stars, beside trees, with her own name written in her own hand. Let the rhythm of her story slow your heart. Let the hush of her final page wrap you like a soft wool blanket. Imagine the soft flicker of candles in the still room, the hush of wind brushing through a hawthorn tree. Let your breath deepen. Let the world drift. There's nothing left to carry tonight. No one to please. No white linens to stain. Just your breath, your stillness, your presence. You made it through her journey and now you can rest. So close your eyes, loosen your hands, let your mind quiet itself and drift into sleep.